Hey everybody, Mr. Eric here, and for the last month or so, I've been really testing out like a wide range of amps, kind of in the sub $200 range. And last week I released a video that was about hybrid tube amps, and you can find that link somewhere on the screen here if you want to go check that out. But in addition to having one hybrid tube amp, which if you haven't watched that video, I really like the Vali tube hybrid, and you can pick those up really cheap. So even like $100, I just bought one used off of HeadFi. So I'll link that video and I'll link that amp down below. Although you can't buy them new anymore, so you got to look used. But either way, I highly recommend that amp. You can check that out. But this video is all about solid state amps. So I wanted to find a solid state option for me, preferably balanced, that I can have as just like a flat, linear, just kind of like a reference point amplifier that I can have, just in comparison with the tube hybrid amp. So something that's kind of not necessarily the opposite of it, but just a baseline, stock sound, I guess. So in order to do that, I got 5 different amps here that I picked up that I have been, demoing and going back and forth between them over the last couple of weeks. And the one that we'll get into all of them here in a little bit, but without, keeping you on the line too much, if you want the very short version, the Magnius, I think it's definitely my favorite, like no question about that. And it's just a wonderful amp. $200 new. $150 is what I bought mine for used. Again, I'm a huge advocate of buying used, because you buy them used, you try them, you can sell them used, and you don't end up spending a whole lot of money. So anyway, this is the one that I like. In addition to that, though, the ones that I have here to compare it to are the Liquid Carbon X by Vali, which I was hoping would be the one I liked because it stacks so nicely with the tube hybrid. I've got the SP200 from S.M.S.L. I've got the Geshelli Erish here, and I've also got the JDS Labs Atom, the good old tried and true JDS Labs Atom. So before we get into sound comparisons here, let's talk just kind of like just brief overview of each of these amps, what their power supplies look like, what kind of connections they have, that sort of thing. Again, I'll start with the Magnius just because that's like kind of my standard here that I'm going to compare all of these to, just because that one's my favorite. So if we look here, the Magnius, it is a pretty simple amplifier. There's not a lot of extra bells and whistles on it, but it does have, pretty much any option that I think you would really need or want. You can see it's got a balanced and a single-ended 1/4 inch, although the balanced is, people claim, significantly better. I'm not sure. With the headphones I've tested, that I've noticed that it's like way better than the single-ended, but it's definitely better, I would say, if you're running this full balance. And that's kind of like, when possible, that's what I'm doing with all of these. So that's really what I'm going to be testing and comparing. You can see on the front here, you've got a volume knob that does have a pretty decent volume pot on it. There's a lot of resistance there. It feels good. There's not a lot of noise, although there is a little bit when you're changing your volume. You've got input selector and high-low gain. These are buttons that push in and out. And that's pretty much the front. On the back, you can see you've got, this one's really nice in the regard that it's got XLR in for fully balanced. It's got RCA in. It's got XLR out, and it's got RCA out. And then you've got the classic on the back, on-off toggle, and power supply in. So really a lot of options on this as far as like how it can be used. You can use it balanced in, balanced out, RCA in, RCA out, all that good stuff. So really just a lot going on with that as far as versatility goes. Just so you're aware of what kind of power supply, just because I think it's nice to know, because some of them can be kind of weird. This is the power supply that comes with the Magnius. It's a big old wall brick and maybe about a 5-foot cable coming out of that, just so you're aware. The next amp let's look at is the Vali Liquid Carbon X. So this is, again, a fully balanced amplifier, but you've got no balanced out, but you do have RCA in and RCA pass through. Okay, so, and then you've got the power option there on the back. It is, you know, it's a big chunky block. This stacks with the Vali Tube Hybrid. It stacks with the THX 789 from Drop. On the front, you can see power buttons. These are kind of like the ones on the Magnius, like they're push-in buttons, and you got input, gain, and power. And then you got single-ended out and balanced out. And then again, you got a pretty decent volume pot there on the knob. So not quite as much functionally going on as the Magnius, but still, you know, a lot of good options. It has, for a power cable, let me go grab it here. So it's got one of these jobs where you've got kind of, you know, the cable that's going into the wall, and you got about 4 feet of cable, and then you've got the cable that's going to go into the unit. That's, again, about 4 feet or so, and then you've got the brick in the middle. So that's the kind of power supply with the Liquid Carbon X. You know what? Let me real quickly look up some power specs here, just so we have those available to us. So for the Magnius here, we've got, from the balanced out, you've got 5 watts at 32 ohms, so quite a bit of power. Single-ended, it's only 2 watts at 32 ohms. For the Liquid Carbon X, balanced, you got 2.8 into 50 ohms, so the Magnius is 3.2 into 50 ohms, just for the comparison there. Single-ended, only about 0.7 into 50 ohms, whereas the Magnius is 1.3. So Magnius definitely has the power advantage over the Liquid Carbon X, but the Liquid Carbon X is no slouch as far as power goes. Okay, moving down the line here, let's take a look at the SP200. So this, I actually really like the build of the SP200. It's probably my favorite build out of all of them. I hate the slant, and you've probably seen this if you're watching this video at this point, but you know, it's not the sides of it, it's like a parallelogram instead of just like a rectangular box, which I get that they did that just to kind of be unique, but gosh, I just think it's stupid, I guess is what it comes down to. I don't like it. But I do think it has the best build of the bunch. It's all toggles on the front. I love toggles. I like them a lot better than the push buttons. So, you know, you got toggles for high-low gain, input select, and on-off. Volume pot probably isn't as nice as the Liquid Carbon or the Magnius. And then you can see you've got balanced out and single-ended out. On the back, not as versatile as those other 2 amps, because this one you can't use as a pre-out. This only has inputs going into it, but you do have balance going in and single-ended going in. I do really one thing I really like about the SP200 is just the simplicity of the power cable delivery, because it just uses the power supply. The power supply is built into the unit, so all you do is just one of these kind of like standard PC power cables just runs right into it. And I like that just for a clean, simple setup. I wish more amps would handle it like that. Power-wise for the SP200, let's look at that. All right, so it looks like for balance, this one is about 3 watts at 32 ohms. So not as powerful, again, as the Magnius. So Magnius so far has the edge power-wise as far as these go. Okay, next up, let's take a look at the Erish. So we'll stick with our balanced here for the first part. Now, you can already tell. So first of all, guaranteed, this camera is not doing this amp justice. This thing is really, it's quite a looker, to be honest with you. So I love the look of this unit. You can tell it's also the smallest by far of any of these units, so it is a very compact system. And I just have to appreciate, like, I just got to take a minute to appreciate that they're doing something different with design here, and they're not just making a black box. Of course, you can get it black if you want. That's the other cool thing, is you can like pretty much custom order these, any color combination you want, any plate combination you want for the front and back. So a very, very cool design. Maybe it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I think it's just nice to have that option out there, just something a little bit different. So kudos to Geshelli for doing something a little bit different design-wise. This one, you'll notice, is, it being so small, it is the simplest of all these amps as well. So it is strictly balanced only, balanced in, and then balanced out on the front, and that's it. You've got a decent volume knob here. I like the pot. I've got no complaints about that. And then you've got little kind of push button, I don't know, very electronic-y, simple buttons here. And you kind of push and hold them to switch from on to off and to switch from high-low gain on this guy. And that's pretty much it. You know, you've got a little power in on the back, and you know, and this guy has just like a little itty bitty, almost like a cell phone charger power brick that goes with it. So again, very simple, very small, very sleek. And like I said, I just love that you've got the option to, you know, customize it, and just that it's a little bit different. So not very versatile though, right? I mean, it's just, you got to be balanced to everything, and that's, so it's kind of a special use case, but in that regard, it's kind of cool. All right, so the final amp that we'll look at here is kind of just the classic JDS Labs Atom. You know, this thing's been around for a long time. A lot of people really, really like this amp. Obviously, this is the lowest quality build of the bunch. It's all plastic build. Although it's not particularly bad by any means. I mean, it's totally fine, but in nice, simple design, I really have no complaints about it. One thing that I do feel is kind of nice about this amp is it is only single-ended, and this is the only single-ended one in the bunch here that's just single-ended. Again, you've got those gain selectors, input selectors on the front, and that's what's kind of cool, is this thing does have a couple of different inputs. So you've got the RCA in, but then you've also got a 3.5 in, which is kind of a nice thing to have, just an extra input. In the like sub $100 amps, I'm not sure that there's a whole lot else out there that has an extra input. Of course, you've got the preamps out too, and then you've got the power in. One little note here of difference is that this does not have an on switch. The on switch is built into the volume pot, which is nice. Like, I don't have a problem with that at all. I could see how some people would rather just have their amp set, like volume-wise, but for me it was never an issue. I kind of tweak the volume, usually song to song anyway when I'm listening. So this one I picked up for $75, and it has, kind of like the Magnius, it's got just like a big wall wart power brick that goes into it. So let's look at specs of the Atom. So at 32 ohms, it delivers 1 watt of power. So the Atom is 1 watt. So power-wise, it goes Atom, 1 watt, Erish, 1 watt, SP200, 3 watts, liquid carbon, I think it was right around 3 watts, and Magnius, 5 watts is the order of power. Price, we've got Atom at $75, Erish at $120, liquid carbon at $120, SP200 at $150, and Magnius at $150. Again, all purchased used, all pretty good prices. I'm very confident that I can sell them all for the same price that I bought them for. Whew, okay. That seems like a lot to go over, and we haven't even got to sound yet. But at least you kind of know where we're at with all these. So let's dig into some sound comparisons now that we've got kind of all that taken care of. So first off, let me just say, let me get my notes pulled up here. Okay, so things to note about the Magnius here. Like, really sound-wise, I feel like there's not a lot to say about this amp in a very good way. Like, I feel like of all these, this one feels extremely linear. Everything is like about the levels that I would want it to be. There's nothing, no part of the frequency range that is, that stands out as being emphasized or anything like that. Everything is clear and crisp, and there's good extension on both ends. There's good instrument separation. It's probably not the widest of the bunch, but it's got a decent sound stage to it. It's just, it sounds, it's linear without being boring is kind of the way that I would put it. So very nice sound all in all. When I compared the SP200 to the Magnius, what I found was that it maybe was a little bit better separated. Vocals were a little more recessed, and everything just seemed like a bit drier on this amp. The details were good, but there was something about them. They just had an edge to them, a grain to them, a sharpness to them. And that's maybe none of that. I think dry is really, really the way to describe this amp. So very detailed, very well extended. Everything's very well separated. It just has this dryness to it that to me, while it wouldn't necessarily be a deal breaker, it just is apparent when you're listening to some of these other amps that this one is not the smoothest of the bunch. So let's talk about the Atom next. It was the next one that I kind of compared head to head with the Magnius. And the Atom, like I like the Atom. I think it's for the price, I think it's a phenomenal amplifier if you only need single-ended. But for me, I feel like this one is almost a bit V-shaped, actually. Like, I feel like it's got a lot of low-end emphasis to it. So if you're into that, that might be a great thing. It's a very intense sounding amplifier. Very, very intense sounding amplifier. I do feel like vocals and mid-range are like a bit recessed. And again, I feel like there's a little bit of emphasis on the lows and the highs with the Atom. So again, energetic, very nice sounding, but not as smooth as the Magnius. So my impressions of the Erish, like I really like this amp, and I really wanted to like this amp. Like I really wanted this to be the one, but to me it's just, vocals are just like a little bit thin sounding on this when compared to the Magnius. It does have a great sense of space. Really good extensions on the highs is something that I noticed with the Erish here. It's definitely a mellower sound than the Magnius, which could be a great thing depending on what headphones you're pairing with it. But for me, it just sounded like a little bit small in comparison, and I just couldn't get into the music as much with the Erish when compared to the Magnius. So, but I did really like it. I do think it's a great little amplifier, especially at $120. But to me, the Magnius just had the clear edge as far as just a cohesive, energetic sound. And then lastly, let's talk about the the Liquid Carbon X here. So this amp, to me, it just seemed a little bit lower resolution than the rest of these amplifiers. Like I just didn't think it just wasn't playing quite on the same level from a technical point of view. It's not unpleasant, but it just feels like a little bit grainier, a little bit dirtier when compared to the rest of them. It did have really good imaging and staging, I thought. But again, I thought voices sounded just a bit thin and artificial when compared to the Magnius. So again, I really wanted to like that one too, just because it would stack nice with my Vali Tube Hybrid that I'm going to keep. But it just fell flat for me. So that's kind of a quick audio comparison of all these. To be honest, they're all pretty decent amplifiers. Obviously the Magnius is my clear favorite here. It just, as far as its capabilities, inputs, outputs, the way it sounds, very linear but still energetic and smooth. It ticks all the boxes for me. So I think if I was going to recommend somebody buy like a desktop amplifier, really I think the Magnius is probably the first thing I would tell people to look at and try to find one used. They're starting to pop up on the used market now. You can get one easy for $175, $150. Then you don't have to pay shipping probably in that regard. And when you're talking about this much power, this clean, and this much connectivity for only $150. Wow, that is a major bargain. So on the used market, you're looking at, you could get a Magnius stack for like 300 bucks probably at this point, or just a little bit above that. And that is legit end game. I feel like that's a legit end game system for a lot of people, would be. Plus you've got the option to run balanced and single-ended if you need it, which would be great. If I had to pick a second place winner, it would probably be the Erish as far as sound for me. Unless you didn't need the balanced, and then the Atom would probably be the way to go. So those would probably be my top 3 picks. The SP200 is just a little too dry for my taste, and then the Liquid Carbon X was just a little too grainy. So I think I don't feel like I'd really recommend those. I am curious to know, like the THX 789, like do all THX amps have that dryness to them? I'd be really curious to find that out, and maybe if I can sell some of these, maybe I'll have an opportunity to test that out here before too long. Well, sorry, this is maybe a bit longer winded than I had planned on it, where the sound part wasn't as much of a piece of it as I thought, but that's my overview of, sub $200 solid state amps that are balanced. And like I said, the Magnius, you can't go wrong, I don't think. So I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions regarding these amps, please just drop them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. If you're into kind of these comparisons that I'm doing, and you like headphones and amps and DACs and all that stuff, consider subscribing to the channel. There will definitely be more to come. Hope you have a great day.